like the show. My name's Jon Slattery, and I am very excited to be here to talk to the creator and the actors and the people who made this show possible. So without further ado, let's get them out here. You guys ready? Donovan Colan as Hunter Cooper. Isabel Gravitt as Tori Cooper. Eunice as Grace Choi. Aimee Carrero as Elena Benitez. Lena as Allie Cooper. Tallman as Nick Brandis. Olivia Munn as Samantha Levitt. The great Jon Hamm as Andrew Cooper. And the creator of the show, writer and director, Jonathan Tropper. Thanks, guys. Get into it. Jonathan, I have a question for you, sir, which is...
Use your microphone, John.
Yes, which is... the structure of the show... Can you hear the microphone? Can you hear me? This is what happens, which is a great entree into the show. The flashback structure of the show. Was that always your idea, or was it just something you decided was suited best for the telling of this story?
I always wanted there to be the voiceover component of the show, and I always, I really wanted there to be a kind of like film noir homage to that kind of voiceover, that kind of, it's future Coop talking about what's happening to present Coop and giving that dichotomy.
Right.
I think the phrasing of "this is what happens" was just an accident. Like sometimes you're writing and you're not sure what to write, so you literally write, okay, this is what happens, and you start writing, and I just said, that sounds like a good way to just get into things, so I just kept it.
Got it. It's always engaging to take an audience into a new world, if you will, the one that you think you know about. How different is it for you doing something like this, that, like workflow-wise, where you, compared to something, creating a world that you aren't as familiar with? I mean, you lived in a community in, I don't know, Westchester or something like this for quite a while. So how does that compare to something that you don't have as much familiarity with?
I think it's just, when you're writing, it's always great to believe deep down that you're an expert in what you're writing about. And, the show I had done before that was about the Chinese immigrant experience in the 1870s, and that took a tremendous amount of research.
Right.
Whereas I felt, while this one took a little bit of research, I felt like no one could call me on not being authentic to this, because I lived it myself for many years. So it gives you a certain level of confidence.
There's some great lines in that voiceover. Life boils down to a series of interconnected decisions. The Millers decided to go to Belize. I decided to go to the Millers. When you sat down with Jon and you started figuring this thing out, was the way he sounded, was his sort of persona a contributing factor to the use of the voiceover as a, noir element?
Yeah, it was very significant, because when I conceived of the show, I just ran into this wall where I really couldn't think of anyone except for Jon to play that role. And so once I met him and had talked to him, I was definitely channeling him in all of the writing. And, and of course I can channel him as much as I want, but then he has to sit down and feel the words and decide how he's gonna, bring them to life or alter them. But the idea was, I was writing to a voice. I mean, Jon's voice has been around in TV for quite a while, and I felt like I had a good handle on what it sounded like, at least my experience of it, and then he comes in and brings himself into it, and then it changes based on how he feels those words and wants to say it.
Coop is an antagonist against his neighbors and friends, while also maintaining the ultimate goal of supporting his family's ability to live in the world that he's growing increasingly disillusioned with. Jon, how do you, I mean, when you play the character who's the primary source of information the audience gets, but you're also a guy who's basically deceiving everyone he's coming into contact with, how do you gauge the amount to give away and what to hold back? I mean, I know it's in the script, but you've always been, or at least in my experience working with you, you are very adept at communicating with it within the character's restricted boundary, and how do you know what balance to achieve to keep the audience leaning in?
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's a tremendous way to keep people wondering what's next and what's true and what's, it gets people to lean in, right? That's the hope of telling a compelling story. And I think, look, it's trusting the material, trusting that the person who wrote this story is going to be able to determine what the right, balance is
Right.
of known quantity and unknown quantity to make it as compelling as possible. And then part of it for me really is playing as much of it as close to the best as possible, because all of the things that we're talking about in this are difficult things for this character to have to come to grips with, whether it's his relationship with his family or his relationship with the person he's sleeping with, or his relationship with his kids, or relationship with his job or his neighbors. All of those things are tricky balances to uphold, and that's a very fun thing to play, because you're constantly keeping all of these plates spinning, and that is, I think, super compelling and super engaging for an audience to watch.
As you're also an executive producer of the show, and I was wondering if
Thanks.
if I know for myself, when I was acting, I started directing, and then it influenced my acting, because I realized that it really is just a part of the process. It isn't. It took the weight off of my shoulders, I felt like, and I wondered if, as an executive producer, or whether you watch cuts or wade in, or whether it's seeing the progress of the show, because that's how television works. You write to what is the voices of the show, and how, I don't know whether the show scripts were all written or not, but did it affect your performance with respect to what you felt the audience was getting or not getting?
Well, I think my strengths as an executive producer lie in trusting the people who I've laid my lot with. So I knew that Jonathan, and we had multiple phone calls and meetings and discussions about how the story would unfold over the course of the first 9 episodes of the season, and we were both up very much on the same page. And I just trusted him to complete the assignment, essentially. And for me, I'm not a super hands-on executive producer. I'm not, this carpet should be yellow and these curtains should be open. Like, no, that's I have too much going on in my day job to worry about that stuff. So it's really about trusting the people to really get to do their jobs, and trust that you hired the right people, or you contributed to hiring the right people to really make that. And that's writ large, and getting people like Craig Gillespie on board to direct the first 2 episodes and establish the tone and establish the look of the show.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things are really Jackie, our costume designer, to put everybody in the softest clothing you can imagine. So soft. That kind of stuff, those decisions really pay dividends down the line when you from an executive producing standpoint. And they really all contribute to making the story richer and deeper and resonate on as many levels as you can.
To that point, were all the scripts written when you started production, or did you sort of watch?
For season 1, I generally like to have them all done except for the finale.
Yeah.
I don't like to write the finale till I've sort of seen the show and seen the actors, and
We did shoot a scene from the finale.
Right.
in the second week of the show.
So I had to actually write that scene when I hadn't written the episode yet, just because we weren't going to come back to that location.
Right.
And that made me really anxious that, like, well, I hope everything still leads to that scene.
Yeah.
But in general, the way I was trained in TV was to always have, I didn't grow up in the network, the broadcast network version of it. It was only premium cable and streaming, and it was always like, have everything ready as much as possible before you start, so that all the efficiencies can be found and the departments can really do their thing.
Right. So there wasn't anything sort of that you watched in watching, dailies or whatever that decided you to take anything in a different direction.
Tiny things, but significantly no. We pretty much had a great map, and like I said, I hadn't written the finale until probably a month or two into shooting, and at that point, I felt like I had a handle on the show in a way to write the finale probably differently than I would have otherwise.
As far as you directed the final block or the final episode of the show as well, how much do you dictate the look of the show? The camera moves a lot in the show. Gillespie did a great job in the first block, which obviously sets up the look of the show.
Just knocking off Gillespie. That's essentially. He set such a strong visual tone, and
It's really
my
good.
thing was always, when it came time for me to start planning my shots, I just rewatched the cuts of the pilot on the second episode, and by then our same DP already kind of knew that language, and so I was able to really focus on the performances and the moments, and the language had really been set for me. It was pretty easy to step into.
It's pretty
that.
strong language. I mean, the camera moves in and out. I mean, it's as you're
Craig-
examining people, it's
Craig is,
accentuating all
for
that.
those of you who are in the filmmaking world, he uses two lenses, a 40 and a 27, and that's pretty much it. And it's pretty spectacular what he gets with just those. So many times when you're in production, you're like, oh, we're going to swap a lens, we're going to go tighter, we're going to go tighter, we're going to go tighter. We're doing it over and over and over again. Craig is not that person. He gets these tremendously spontaneous performances and moments in these what people would consider sort of wides, but they're not really. So it's a real feather in his cap, the work he did on our show, which I knew because
So does that contribute-
another reason why I'm a great executive producer.
Contributes to a lot of actors in the same shot, a lot of organic playing of scenes as opposed to chopping it up and putting everybody in singles all the time, which is I think why the thing looks so cinematic. Olivia, I read that you said that the viewer may not be able to relate to our exact situations, but they'll relate to us as human beings going through this, which I agree. I mean, I think that's the thing about creating a world that people think they know about, and then you get deeper into that, and it becomes subjective. I mean, it becomes specific, which this is. Do you think that Sam has a different perspective on this world because she came into it without her own money?
Yeah, I think that, for Sam, it's very clear to her when she looks at everyone here and is able to look at it from afar that they've been set up to succeed in life. I think I remember a few years ago, there's a lot of conversation about people, in the world and culturally about how some people are set up for success. Some people born into it, a lot of it having to do with race. And I remember having a lot of conversations with friends, especially as I'm a firstborn American, where my mom was an immigrant, and talking to friends about that, about understanding that, because some friends would be like, but I worked really hard. I'm not saying I didn't, I worked really hard to get there. And I'd explain, yes, no one's saying that you aren't working hard. What you're not understanding is that on your way up the mountain that you've worked so hard to climb, certain things have been opened up for you. Whereas for the rest of us, a lot of times it's this Sisyphean task, and you're going up and then getting stopped, and going up and getting stopped, and those you haven't been given a map. And when you get to a certain guard station, the guard doesn't open up the gate for you. And I think for Sam, she's looking at this and saying, yes, you guys have all earned this, but how easy was it for you to hit certain stations in life, to accomplish what you've accomplished, and to be able to have what you have. And so I think that there's a feeling of not idolizing them and realizing that although she really wants to be in that world, she doesn't do it because she idolizes them. She does it because she believes that she deserves to be there.
Do you, you have that coming into that world, and then Coop sort of achieves that perspective through the circumstances of the story. Do you think, how similar do you think they are as two people who've sort of seen behind the curtain, as it were?
I think very similar when we meet them, and I think that's what I was so drawn to in this show. One, I love watching, even in real life in the news, like watching people with a lot crumble, and I think it's fascinating. And I think my mom told me a long time ago, she said, you'll know someone's true character when they're told that they can't have something that they want. Yeah. And so I love that my character was also crumbling, and I liked being able to play this person who's like watching her life slip through her hands, and being able to see the similarity between Coop and Sam, where they're both like at the edge of falling off a cliff and doing everything they can to like keep clawed in to the side, and it's really fascinating. Jon is such a fantastic actor, and like watching the nuances of somebody having to keep up this appearance as he's like, as just the turmoil and the anxiety is just ever present, and being able to actually as an actor like play off of that and have that familiarity. And because even though we have a relationship that my character wants to progress into a different stage, and it's purely at this point a sexual relationship, they have this feeling where they both understand what's happening to each other. And I think that's something really beautiful, that's very human, that we connected on.
Mark, you,
Yes.
sir, your character Nick's a famous retired basketball player. Often as actors, we're asked to do things we don't know how to do, but we say we do. You're like, yeah, can you play the trumpet? Sure, I can.
Yeah.
How was it intimidating stepping into the role to play a famous athlete? And I mean, I know you have a history in as an athlete.
Sure.
But did you sort of take inspiration from anybody, or when you were preparing to do it?
If I think of an inspiration, it would be a player like Chauncey Billups. Like pros pro, team player, can do it all. And although, yes, like you said, I do come from an athletic background, that made it so that I was super confident about playing. Like as an athlete, when we watch things that are supposed to be athletes and
they're not
actors who've never
very
played
good.
ball.
Most all the time.
It hurts.
Brutal.
It hurts a special part of my body.
Yeah.
And it pinches another part of my soul. So a big part of it for me was, look, I'm gonna show all my athletes out there. Here we are. Like we've arrived.
Yeah.
But it was still intimidating because, despite being
Three-time NBA All-Star, right? Is that what they say? Yeah.
I mean, I want that to be as believable as possible.
Yeah.
And I think I did okay.
I think you did.
That's also why that was of everything we cast, that role took the longest, because we had
Sure.
to find someone who could act and be the character and also, not embarrass us athletically.
And also what Mark brings to the role, which is almost impossible, is to be thrust into this situation where you are meant to absolutely hate this guy.
That was my next question.
And also, boy, you just don't. Like, what the reason, and I remember sitting on Zooms reading the lines with Mark and going like, this guy, you cannot have a bad feeling toward this guy. He's just so pleasant and lovely. It's gonna be amazing watching Coop go, I wanna fucking hate this guy, but I can't because he's just awesome.
Like you're also rooting for him.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like, I hope it
even though
works
you
out.
know exactly, and that was such a tremendous quality that Mark brought, and then that made it just a no-brainer to hire
But
him.
that was a question I had. Was that a conscious choice of it? Because you come off as a very sunny, sweet guy who also happened to be his best friend. And, you know, I know there's extenuating circumstances with Amanda's character and who left who when and all that, but to counter being the guy who stole Coop's wife, was it a conscious choice to be that guy, or is that just something that they saw in you and that's why they cast you?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. It was a conscious choice. Also, John, thanks for saying that, man. I wasn't ready for that. I was like, don't you make me fucking drop a tear in front of all these people. But for me, what I was gonna piggyback on and answering the last question was more so, or more than being intimidated about being athletic or you know, being good enough as an NBA player to make the role believable. I was more intimidated about that part of it because I met with Jonathan Tropper and he told me about what they see in the character, and I said, "Oh shit, that's the intimidating part."
Right.
So yeah, it was a conscious choice, and I think what made it doable for me was approaching it knowing about the conflict that constantly existed within him, and making a connection to my experience as an athlete and what I know NBA players go through, and you know, having to put on a smile and have a brave face right in the middle of, you know, perhaps losing the biggest game of their career. And I experienced that myself, where there was a game that I got injured in and had to go do a press conference right afterwards and not show how upset I was. So I channeled that a bit with the character.
Well, it really works to sort of rehumanize the whole thing all over again. Every time you think you know what the circumstances are, I think the show successfully does that all the time, and I think it's conscious in the writing of like re-gauging your position in the world and what you thought you wanted versus what you now have, and do I still want this? Lena, I have a question, which is, was the character always a singer? Is this for, I mean, you can answer that because you'd know.
Yes.
Whether, yeah, it
Yes,
was.
actually,
On
yeah,
paper, the character was a singer.
Yeah,
Performer.
I had 2 audition sides, and the first audition side was, it opens with her playing guitar, singing fake plastic trees on a lawn, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do that. I'd done that. And I was like, well, I'll just grab my guitar, I'll just do that, you know, whatever. And I did that for my self-tape. Yes, I got this off a self-tape. Very cool. But yeah, she was always a singer, which is really nice, so I got really lucky there.
Yeah, well, I think you guys got lucky too. Is that why you went to Lena to begin with, or did you?
No, honestly, we had put it out there, and we got a bunch of takes in. And the problem is that, I mean, Lena's a Tony Award-winning singer, and
Exactly.
obviously we were very moved by her singing. But the thing we were looking for also was who was going to click as this very troubled younger sister.
Right.
The bonus was I only found out after we cast her, she'd already cut an album of Radiohead covers, hadn't you? So that was a great bonus.
Pretty handy.
But for us, in all those processes, it was getting them to read with John and seeing
Right.
who really clicked in that way.
The character is self-described as bipolar, which could be probably played many ways. It has been played many ways. As an actor, how helpful is it to be able to express what the character is going through by sitting on someone's lawn and performing a song? I mean, it seems like a pretty good leg up, you know, to describe or try to convey what the character's going through.
Yeah, I think the great thing about Allie is I get a chance to express emotionally what's happening on the inside through song.
Right.
And nobody else gets to do that. It's her kind of special outlet, a way that she can connect to something deeper. And it's like the song understands what I'm feeling. You know, you don't understand what I'm feeling, but this song understands me. So that's a really important part of her character. And I didn't really think of her as bipolar or anything. I didn't want to do too much research into that because I think anyone who's suffering from any kind of, depression or just anything like that, they're just masking what's going on the inside because they just want to try and feel normal and be perceived as normal for everyone else. And the cool thing about Allie is that she has a great sense of humor about her situation and kind of her disaster-like self.
Yeah.
And she loves to lean into that and make fun of that and just own it. And she just doesn't, care what anyone else thinks, really. She's struggling herself. Everyone else is normal, but her world is abnormal. And so she's just trying to fit in a world that wasn't made for her.
Got it. Aimee, your character comes in, she's introduced a little bit later in the series, but without spoiling anything, you have a great role as an accomplice slash partner to Coop. When you see great scenes with great dialogue, which, by the way, the dialogue is great, pretty much throughout. I've seen all these episodes and it's terrific. And having experienced that a time or two, how great is it to have that? To go into a scene sparring with Jon Hamm, armed with great dialogue. I've been in those rooms and isn't it great? I mean, how much fun is that?
Yes. A dream come true, especially because in 2009 I did audition for Mad Men. I co-star and had one line, and the casting director was laughing hysterically. And then I was like, it's in the bag. And then my agent called and said, it's not a comedy. So, so I didn't get the role. So, when I got the audition, I was thrilled. And I didn't know where it was going, because she's not in the first couple of episodes.
Yeah.
And so all I had was the sides. And as a Latin actress, you kind of dread the day that the housekeeper role comes your way. And but then I saw Tropper's name, and then I saw Hamm's name. I was like, oh shit, I gotta read it. And then I read it, and then that was it. It's
Yeah.
exactly right. I think when the writing is there, and I think Jonathan does a lot of his directing in the writing, or at least it's there for you if you want it. And I think that I knew exactly what to do because of the dialogue and because of the writing. So it was a real dream come true.
It must have been. I mean, the reaction, the sort of, you're such an entree into the flip side of what we've seen up until your entrance, the juxtaposition of all of it. So what was how many scripts did you get when you first?
I didn't get any scripts, but Jonathan was lovely enough to talk to me and have a conversation, which is always really nerve-wracking as an actor. I don't know if there are any actors in the audience, but when you get a call back and then you're like, can I have a creative conversation? And they can literally tell you to fuck off. And thankfully he didn't tell me that. So we had like a long talk, and he was very open to, I think originally she was a different nationality, and I was like, hey, I think I could really nail this Dominican accent because my mom's Dominican. And he was like very open to it. But you mentioned a little bit about subverting the expectations, and that's what I loved about the show when I finally did get to read the scripts, because you meet these characters and you think you know them, and that's the trap of the show, where you think you've got them figured out, but then as the story progresses, there's so much more to peel away, kind of like an onion. So it's been, I can't believe we're doing season 2 and I'm still hired, and thanks for editing out my pregnant belly this season. Appreciate you.
Eunice plays Grace Choi. It's such an interesting character. You think, you see a lot of Grace with Barney, but you also see her with the ladies at the club. And then her parents enter. And then there's a formality that sort of washes over Eunice. And I wondered, is she just from a different version of the same wealthy community?
Grace is meant to be from a much wealthier community.
Right.
Her parents are Korean nationals, and they've only recently moved to, is it San Francisco that they come from? I forget. they come to the States to be closer. But this is, you know, they are of the Crazy Rich Asian ilk. Like,
Yeah.
it's that level of wealth, I believe. And so she sees the wealth that's around her, and she's just like, yeah, standard. You know, there's not a lot. To her, this is the water that she's been swimming in her whole life.
Right.
So yeah, it's not something I could truly connect with. I'll say that.
Does she also have an added perspective because Barney, being Coop's business manager and probably a lot of other people in this community, has seen everybody's bottom line and bank balance? Is there an extra, you know, she's from that, but she's also seen in a way behind the curtain as well, because she sees what everybody's really worth.
Well, I've actually talked to Hoon about this, and he, in his opinion, he was like, you know, he's going to keep all that stuff to himself and classified because he's professional. But I do think that there's a certain level of fish and bird coming together. According to Grace's parents, marrying Barney was definitely a disappointment.
Right.
I mean, yes,
It's pretty evident.
yeah, he is making millions of dollars. Yes, he is in charge of the wealth of some of the wealthiest people. But in their eyes, because he came from, you know, middle class and made his way up to where he is, therefore he is unworthy of the hand of their daughter. So she definitely, it just kind of shows how much more she has decided to marry for love, because there was nothing about this situation that was what it was supposed to be, what her parents had planned for her.
Isabel, who plays Tori Cooper, that character's going through a lot, obviously. Divorce, parents divorce, pressures of looking toward college, relationship with her boyfriend, who Coop obviously doesn't like very much. I have one important question for you. Can you beat Jon Hamm at tennis?
No.
That's very true.
Jon Hamm is good at like everything.
Yeah, he is.
Truly.
Too bad.
He has a lot of free time, I guess, to perfect your stuff. Yeah.
I just wondered, being so young and being involved in with all these people who have, some of whom have done more, have been around longer, was it intimidating in any way to have to take on so much? It's a very complicated part, which you seem to do extremely effortlessly.
Thank you. I mean, at first, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, seeing Jon attached was like, no way in hell am I going to be able to do this. And then I ended up booking it, and everyone was so insanely gracious and welcoming, and it was really just a team effort. And yeah, it was, I expected it to be a lot scarier than it actually was. It's actually pretty smooth.
Thank you. Donovan.
Hey.
Hi. Still awake? Could you play the drums before? Are you musical? Was that a thing on the? Was that a requirement to the part?
I don't remember if we spoke about that before I got the part, but I played a little bit of drums. I've been playing piano non-seriously most of my life, but I got.
He's so good. He was like, for his homework, he was doing like,
It's a very stupid question.
When we saw the piano, we wrote that in and forgot about the drums.
Yeah, that's just. Say that
Sorry,
was a
what was
good cut. My last question for you is what didn't you know? I mean, again, being a young actor, what didn't you know that you learned on the set with Jon Hamm and Jonathan and Craig Gillespie? I mean, what a gift to work with a director like that right out of the gate. I'm not that this is your first job. I know that's not true, but what would you say you took away in the first series, in the first season, that you didn't know before?
Well, the first thing I noticed is that there was a lot of improv that we did on set, especially with Jon, and I think it's great. Like it kind of forces you to think about what the actor is saying rather than just what's in the script.
Right.
And I think that's like my favorite thing in acting, and that's makes it real and it makes it the scene so much more connected and natural.
Well,
I think a big part of it was too, especially when we looked at Donovan and Isabel and casting the kids, is that we wanted that relationship, especially between Coop and Mel, to be realistically messy. That needed to be shitty and fun and funny and awful and all of the things that it always is when you're that age, dealing with these people, going through this relationship and all of that stuff. And I think Jonathan had a very good handle on it, but we also built in enough room for it to be wiggly and messy and improv-y and silly and shitty and awful and all the things that it is. And that these guys were very adept at being able to jump into that and have fun with it. And that's, I think, why that relationship is very cool. Those relationships.
well, thank you, everybody. The show, they're kicking us out of here, is great. It gets better. Trust me, I've seen them all. I just realized, if I had ever imagined I'd be sitting between these two guys, I just feel like I'm sitting in a piece of television history right here, and just want to thank you very much for doing this for us. And my pleasure.